Do you have any advice on how victims of bullying can deal with it, or at least how to minimize the impact of it and heal afterwards? So with anything serious like this crucial starting point is getting support. Now, that can be tricky, and I think it's really important to appreciate that, because often when we're in this type of a situation, it's like, well, who do we talk to and who can we trust, and will they understand? There can be a lot of doubt, a lot of questions there. But a fundamental critical thing to appreciate is that there are people that absolutely care and will do everything they can to help. That's just a fundamental starting point, to just know that and to believe that very, very strongly. Now, again, that still doesn't mean that there isn't sometimes a bit of work to find those paths and to find those people. But at least if you know that to be the case, then you can be strong enough to go on that path and to try and check in and find that support. And, to the degree that there's an urgency or there's any level of threat in this particularly, make sure that you're getting in touch with the relevant service or supports available in your locality. And if it's something that's challenging but maybe a little less urgent, you may be talking to other people, or again checking in with support services at whatever pace is appropriate for you. So it's not that you should feel under massive pressure to sort all of this, but you should feel that sense that there is support there, and checking in with it and researching it and seeing what the options are. There's good support groups, there's online services, we're available in person as well, and it's really important to avail of that support. So on a personal level, when you're in that situation, what do you do before, during, or after? One really critical part of the experience of having challenging interpersonal interactions where there's bullying going on, or those types of threats, is not to take it personally. Now, that might sound sort of obvious, and you could certainly argue that it's hard not to take it personally when it's aimed directly at you, and that's entirely fair. However, still, do not take it personally. Because one of the worst aspects, I suppose, of a challenging bullying experience is how, in a way, hypnotic it can be. We can just get pulled into the experience, and our very sense of self then can be defined on what's happening. So it's not that, there's 1,000 ideas or 1,000 people in the world, but one of them is saying one thing, and that's counterbalanced against what everybody else is saying or doing. Very often, just the way our system is built, when there's a threat or a challenge, our attention zooms in, our perception takes it and expands it, so it starts to fill our entire range of experience. And so it becomes our entire world. We're worrying about it in advance. We're thinking back on it afterwards. We think, what should I have said? What should I have done? There's a sense of apprehension. So it starts to really consume a huge amount of our attention. And while in real life, there still may be too much of it, still there's probably much less of it in real life than there is in our perception and in our experience, because of the amount of energy or emotion that we put into it. So a nice way of framing it, which is literally true, but we forget it sometimes in the moment, is that how that other person speaks or acts, what they do or what they don't do, that represents them, and it doesn't represent you. So how that person speaks or acts, what they do, what they don't do, that represents them. They're representing themselves in what they're doing. It doesn't represent you. Now, again, there still may be impacts on you. And of course, if there's any sense of threat here, again, get that support. That's really, really important. But even in that case, there's still different ways of framing the thing. And you could have two people who are in the same challenging situation, one of whom doesn't like what's happening at all, but sees it as the other person being out of line and, doesn't take it personally, and another person who's having the same experience, which is challenging, but they really allow it to get to them, and they really identify with it, and they take it very personally. Now, it's not your fault if you take it personally. When something is hypnotic, that just means that it's engaging. like a music video you can't stop watching, or song you can't stop listening to, or just something that captures your attention. It's not that you're choosing it in any way, so it's not about blame or fault. But it's a little bit like the snake in the Disney films, where you just kind of get caught up and captivated by it. What we have to do to some degree is kind of break out of it a little bit and realize that there are other people who care about us. There are other places to focus our attention. There are other options available for how we respond to this. And what's typically going on is that a person themselves, from the point of view of the bully, rarely, if ever, will a person act in that way towards you when they themselves are calm, well-adjusted, in a good, peaceful, zen place, in control of their life and happy within themselves. That's not what tends to happen. What tends to happen is they've got their stuff going on for whatever reason, and they're projecting it outwards. They're putting it on other people because of that. So what we want to have is kind of the attitude of a good police officer who is able to see something that's wrong and intervene, maybe to protect other people, and arrest the person, to maybe restrain them if needed, to arrest them. But to then, at the same time, be able to chat to them in the squad car on the way back to the station. In other words, they're not taking it too personally, even though they were wrestling with each other a moment earlier. Now, that's challenging. I appreciate that takes some maturity. But there's a kind of a clue in there as to how we can give it a bit more space. So it's almost like in a horror film example. If it's some sort of a wild horror film, and let's say Uncle Bob, the zombies get Uncle Bob, so there's a horde of zombies coming. You manage to get inside the cabin in the woods, but poor Uncle Bob, one of the zombies, bites him. So Uncle Bob becomes one of the zombies. So now Uncle Bob is after you. But it's not personal. It isn't really Uncle Bob. It's just kind of the situation. So you're obviously still taking it extremely seriously. You're getting whatever support you need. You're taking whatever precautions you need. But in a way, you're not taking it personally. It's an army of the undead after you in the zombie film. It's not personal. It's just kind of something that's happening. So that's almost, not quite that wild, but almost the way I think we want to look at some of these situations. So, take strong action, get supports, do what you need to do. But I think what we want to do in the midst of that is reclaim your personality, not to let yourself be defined by the situation you happen to be in. And you can normally find evidence of this, Think of 10 different types of people Do they all treat you the same? Probably not, So one person is treating you poorly and another person treats you very well and somebody else in the middle. It's probably about them rather than you. Now, it's not to say that we can't obviously work on our own stuff as well, but if it's something along the lines of bullying, well, that's obviously more than you at play. There's other stuff going on there, and that's on them, not on you. You can always, and it's always a wise thing to do, to be improving your interpersonal skills, to be getting to know yourself a bit more. It's an ongoing practice. But, of course, in any really toxic situation, we want to make sure that we're getting those supports, or we're removing ourselves from it, or we're doing whatever we need to. So, on that note, forming other connections is a really important thing to do. Because sometimes just circumstantially we're in a situation where, it's kind of the only game in town. We're with a person that, it's just not doing what it should be doing for us. And this can happen in school, it can happen in workplaces, it can happen in families, it can happen in relationships. There's any number of scenarios where it can happen. So when we can't extricate ourselves from a difficult situation, at least immediately, what we can do, though, often is bring in other supports. And, preferably that's other meaningful relationships that are empowering. But at least it can be indirectly that. It can be various online supports, or it can be, videos or audio or podcasts or whatever else it might be. But just making sure that our attention is being filled with things that are empowering, that kind of remind us of who we really are, so that other people's stuff seems much more like other people's stuff. And then we can feel a bit stronger and then take whatever the necessary steps are to grow and to heal and to move beyond those challenges. So, stay committed to that. Don't let yourself be captivated too much by other people's stuff. Remember who you are, bring back those feelings of ease and wellness, and, continue to cultivate them. It's so important. If you found this valuable, do like, subscribe, and share. And what's your experience? Do you have any questions or topic suggestions? You can contribute in the comments, on social media using #bodymindself, or on jfl.com.